Добрый день, я куда-то туда попал, нет? Сереж, добрый день.
Машка, здравствуйте.
Добрый день, да. С тобой вдвоем. Ну, давай друг другу что-нибудь расскажем. Альбина еще с нами. Владимир. Так, у меня там подписано.
Света еще здесь.
Света, это кто?
Добрый день. Слышите меня?
У нас выступающий. Вот Егор Михайлович здесь.
Здравствуйте.
Добрый день. Так.
Здрасте.
Света, это...
Ну что, почти вовремя. Докладчики, по крайней мере, пришли по первой сессии.
Да,
И дискуссанты на месте. Альбина,
Егор, подскажи, мне нормально слышно? Без перерыва?
Тебя, да? А я как ежик в тумане по-прежнему, да?
Егор Михайлович.
Да, Сергей.
Меня слышно хорошо?
Да, слышно, видно, супер.
Отлично. Наташа, привет.
Наташа, добрый день. Наташа, Димаков Александр, знаешь такого?
Оксана Марковна, вы у меня спрашиваете? Нет, я не знаю.
Да. Не знаешь, да? Хорошо. Посмотри по Ипсу, если нет, если есть, дай мне знать.
Да, сейчас посмотрим.
Света, а что у вас там за
Не
красивая
сейчас
кошечка?
вообще.
Это наш, да.
Так, Альбина, Ирина Васильевна должна вовремя быть?
Как кошечку зовут?
Лео. Кот.
Красивый очень, рыжий.
Спасибо.
Так.
Александр
Меня не
Маркович,
слышно?
это ИПС.
Ну, это я не могу.
Спасибо, доброе утро. Ну, давайте мы начнем тогда. Угу. Так, хорошо. Да. Александр Маркович. Александр Маркович, слышно, нет? Маркович тоже не слышно. Как-то у нас со связью плохо.
Слышно, я слышу все.
Александр Маркович не слышно.
Александр Маркович,
Ну, матч завис.
он что-то завис. Да.
Коллеги, ну, давайте время, чтобы не терять. У нас в этом году, в общем-то, юбилейный семинар, 10-й ежегодный международный исследовательский семинар для аспирантов. Вот. Это, на самом деле, очень важное событие в рамках апрельской конференции, показывает, в общем-то, степень развития, ну, и наших аспирантов, и их вклад, в общем-то, в научное знание. И, опять же, это прекрасная возможность нам с вами обменяться какими-то последними трендами вот, в изучаемых дисциплинах, да, и наметить, так сказать, направление будущих исследований. Вот. И я предлагаю открыть первую сессию и передаю слово Беляеву Владимиру Андреевичу, университет МГИМО, город Москва, научный руководитель, доктор экономических наук, профессор Столбов. И у Владимира Андреевича очень интересная тема – это динамика IPO, это межстрановые и межиндустриальные результаты с 90 по 2022 год. Владимир Андреевич, я вот передаю вам слово.
Сергей, благодарю. Меня хорошо слышно?
Да, вас прекрасно слышно.
Отлично. Как я понимаю, у нас рабочий язык английский, поэтому...
Да, давайте на английском.
So, ladies and gentlemen, pleasure to participate in the conference. So, my topic is, I would say it's not a whole analysis, but I'd rather say that's a snapshot of IPO market during the last 30 years. Yes, there's a mistake on the first slide. It's until 2022. So to perform this analysis, I compiled a database, quite an extensive one, that includes more than 16,000 IPO deals during these 30 years, with the size of more than $50 million. The source for this database was Bloomberg, but it's worth mentioning that Bloomberg is prone to mistakes, unfortunately, and with regard to such an extensive database, I had to spend quite some time to clean it out. So there were some omissions and some extreme values that should have been carefully double-checked. So the database includes all the important characteristics of IPO deals, a description, a first-day return, and that is the ratio of the price by the end of the first trading day to the opening price or to the price of the IPO, the offer size, company name, the geography, and the industry. So let's see what we've had during those 30 years. So it's worth mentioning that IPO market is prone to clustering, and clustering is also called a hot market during this period of time when the number of IPOs, the volume of IPO market surges considerably compared to the previous volumes. During this period, so we had five hot markets during these 30 years. What are the characteristics of these hot waves? apart from increasing in volumes, usually the average size of companies rushing to carry out their IPO deals increase, and the first day return also tend to increase. We can see that it's not always the case, but because, for instance, in 2006-2008 IPO wave, the median first day return was didn't grow apparently, but still during other IPO waves it was the case. So, and it's worth also mentioning that high first day return is the characteristic of a successful IPO deal when the demand for the shares of the company that is going on IPO is in a high demand. And in the scientific, scientists regard high IPO, high first day return as a feature that shows successful deals. So several words about geographical breakdown. What were the companies from what countries performed their IPOs the most? So no wonder that the United States and the whole North America region were the top performer during these 30 years. That's first of all because of a very liquid market and easy procedure of listing for the US countries. And what we can say that companies from the United States, first of all, occupied the biggest share of the IPO market, but the average size of companies was smaller considerably than somewhat 20% smaller than from the rest of the world for the world average. That, as I've already mentioned, due to the fact that the procedure is easier for the companies to perform their IPOs. They have access to a very liquid market, and eventually smaller companies tend to perform IPOs in the United States. And apart from this, Europe performed in line with China in money terms, but the number of companies from Europe was lower compared to for instance, to China. As for China, we will discuss it later in detail, but it has occupied quite a substantial share of the IPO market, somewhat even higher than Europe in money terms. Now we will see how it evolved through time a little bit later, as I've said. So as for Russia, also we will dedicate some time to that separately. But as for Russia, we can see that its volume was actually negligible in money terms and in total number of deals. But the average size of a deal was twice as high as for the world average. So coming next, industry breakdown. And what is interesting, what came to me as a surprise, that financial sector actually occupied such a high share of the IPO market, much higher than technological sector that goes next after the banks, funds, and insurance companies. So one of the driving forces of the financial sector was that first of all, Chinese banks actively carried out their IPO deals throughout this actually 20 years from the year 2000 due to reforms of the Chinese market that we'll talk about a little bit later. And the second thing is that financial companies actually need cash when they go on IPOs, and the average check is much higher than for the rest of industries. when they perform it. So, but what is the second thing that is interesting to draw your attention to is the dynamics of the financial sector throughout these 30 years. We can see it on the right graph. We can see that financial sector actually didn't perform well during the last IPO wave that took place actually just 2 years ago, when after the COVID, actually not after, but throughout the COVID. That is due to the fact that financial sector was hit the most by the pandemic, when the banks had to strengthen their rules in terms of crediting other companies, and technological companies, on the other hand, took the lead during this wave, as they first of all needed cash to expand their business that was surging due to the fact that everybody was going online through that time. Coming next, several words about China. That's an interesting thing, actually.
Vladimir, you have 5 minutes left.
Yeah, sure. Regarding China, so let's take a look at the table on the left. We can see that Chinese share increased 6-fold compared to its share in 1990s. So the main fact, the main reason for that was due to the fact that China became a member of WTO. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Because some window popped up. So due to the fact that China became a member of WTO, and the Chinese government resorted to IPO as an instrument to decrease participation of the government in companies. And they carried out a lot of IPOs. Was selling government shares through IPO to the market. And first of all, the Chinese sold shares of top 5 banks on the IPOs. And what is interesting to mention here is that Chinese companies, despite the fact that Chinese market is a little bit has its own specifics and is actually independent from the rest of the world, with little participation of foreign investors, Chinese companies tend to go on IPOs during hot markets as well as the rest of the world. And another thing that is worth mentioning is that successful IPOs performed by Chinese companies have triggered actually hot markets, as it was the case with Alibaba and a number of Chinese banks during the wave of 2005-2007. And as we can see, Chinese companies only gain momentum in this regard. Their share of the market in money terms is only increasing throughout the time. So as for the Russian IPO market, here is the situation is a little, I would say, disappointing, except for the 1 year when 2 notorious so-called people's IPO carried out. The problem is wide known. It is low liquidity of the Russian market and historic undervaluation of again Russian market that has been the issue for the last 20 years, and companies don't resort to IPO as an instrument of effectively funding their business. And also one interesting thing that bulk of Russian blue chips like Gazprom didn't go on IPO in a classical way. They had kind of direct listing during 90s. So despite the fact that these companies have a huge capitalization, we don't see them, I mean, in the IPO market. They are not included in that. They didn't raise any money through this process. So, and to conclude, just a quick recap of what we've seen, that IPO market is prone to clustering when first-day return and the number of average size of IPOs increase considerably. During IPO waves, companies from during hot IPO waves, companies from all industries tend to rush to the market and sell their shares at higher price. So the chances for successful IPO increases during hot waves. Financial sector used to be the main driver of the IPO, yes, but it performed. It showed lackluster performance during the last IPO wave due to the fact that the sector was hit most by the pandemic. And what else? Yes, China is dominating the market, and the trend is increasing. And actually, Asia, ex-China, also increases its share at a fast pace. And yes, the Russian market is stagnating, and actually not many prospects we see in the future for that, due to, again, undervaluation. Even liquidity is not this big problem as undervaluation here. So thank you very much for your attention. Pleasure to participate. If you have any questions, I'd be glad. I'll try to answer.
Vladimir, thank you very much. Very interesting presentation. A couple of questions from my side. The first question: which plans to develop this topic? How you will include all the results you have obtained in your future research and evidence?
I'm planning, yes, to develop this research in terms of, first of all, IPO waves and what are the factors that affect IPO, hot IPO markets. So I did something similar, but with hot IPO markets in the banking sector, in the financial sector. I found that actually the dynamics of, for instance, stock market doesn't affect IPO waves to a great extent, but what really affects is investors' sentiment, and I want to perform again this kind of regression, but on the bigger database that includes all the industries, and that is more accurate, I would say, in terms of IPO dynamics as a whole. So that would be the next step in developing this topic.
Another question: why do you think, you partially answered this question, but I still will ask it again. Why do you think the number of IPOs in Russia since 2005 still in the low case? You mentioned undervaluation, but it's a chronic problem. And does it mean that cost of capital for cost of equity for Russian companies is much higher than the cost of debt, so the companies are prefer to issue debt, and even though in situation when debt is quite short and mid-term?
Sure, absolutely is the case. The problem with Russian IPO market is undervaluation. The shareholders don't want to sell their companies, for instance, at multiple, for instance, EV/EBITDA of like 3 to 4x compared to world average, for instance, like 5-6. So they are losing like 20-30% of their capitalization just at the very beginning, and the problem is that the Russian market has also notorious notoriously known for, so to say, poor practices with regard to minority investors. That's also the case, and due to this fact, when the situation allowed this, when the participation of international capitals in the Russian market was high, actually also it was the case that had a very big impact on Russian undervaluation again. So poor, how it's called, governance practices, also a factor. And yes, the eventual cost of capital doesn't fall when you perform your IPO, but still you have to incur costs additional to maintain your publicity. That's also the factor that our companies don't want to have this public status and have to deal with minority shareholders.
Okay, question from Yulia Vanesova. What are the main reasons of IPO in the Russian companies for today? Because we know several interesting examples as Bush recently. And what is, in your opinion, are the drivers of IPO in the nearest future?
Thank you for the question. Yes, several companies announced plans to carry out IPOs. Metal Invest, Wush did it, and some Genetico, if I'm not mistaken, is trying to get listing. Difficult to say what are their motivations. On one hand, some companies are like venture-backed, and their public status is the next step in their logical step in their company life. But as for the rest of the companies, that's an interesting question, because the thing is that if we'll see some good performing IPOs in the Russian market, that when the shareholders would manage to sell their shares at prices they want, actually, I would say at least somewhat with not this high discount to peers, international peers. I would say that the number of such companies that plan to go on IPO would increase considerably. So that's like I mentioned with...
Я кликаю. Сейчас вот еще раз кликну.
Vladimir, go on. This is technical.
Okay. So yes, I actually don't know why they do this. I mean, for sure, some of them need companies, but and the main reason is that some companies really do this because they need this public status. They are venture-backed.
Я выхожу на экран.
Да, Ирина Васильевна, вас слышно. Александр Маркович, you raised your hand. Do you have questions for Vladimir?
Turn on your
mic. Александр, включите микрофон, пожалуйста.
Да. Okay. Vladimir, thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting. The question is, what's your forecast according to IPO market for different regions? Maybe America, maybe China, maybe Russia?
Yeah, so as for China, I'd say that the prospects are good, but in terms of the problem is that as a lot of Chinese companies carried out their IPOs on the in the United States. Now that's kind of a problem for them, especially for big companies, and they have this tight reporting rules nowadays, and so on and so forth. That is a negative factor that can impact considerably the IPO market in China by Chinese companies. But still, with the development of local exchanges that are quite liquid, and with the trend of transition of big companies back to Chinese exchanges, we can see that it won't be the problem. As for Russia, I wouldn't say that there are actually blue chips left that actually would like to perform IPOs, because I suspect there is no liquidity for big IPOs on the Russian market, and but we can see some deals performed by small cap companies, middle cap companies, up to $100 million check, maybe more than that. But not many again. As for the European market, it has been stable throughout the time. It was stable, but the United States, I suspect it will stay high, and the Chinese market will be gaining its share further. So I suspect the momentum can slow down a little bit in the midterm, because recently we had this hot IPO market, and the market should cool down a little bit, and we might see another hot wave in 2-3 years when the liquidity gets back to the market, when probably the Fed starts cutting its rate.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions?
Thanks.
So it's pleasure. Thank you. Thank
Ну, и
you.
как дискурсант я бы тоже хотел добавить такие пожелания, да, но если, соответственно, вы уж такое исследование делаете, да, то хорошо бы в конце дать какую-то информацию для слушателей, как вы будете в дальнейшем эти результаты использовать. Вы их сказали, но на слайдах это я просто не увидел, да?
Да.
Второй момент, вот вы когда делаете еще анализ, соответственно, IPO рынка, да, то лучше бы, конечно, вы еще сделали, более информативные слайды, потому что, можно было там почетче связать, например, волны IPO там с какими-то показателями, которые, по крайней мере, вы уже сейчас видите, да, это, например, макропоказатели, показатели, связанные с процентной ставкой, да, там вот, когда вы про российский рынок говорите, там, да, то вот вы даете тезис важный, что undervaluation есть, да, так покажите, где undervaluation, да, потому что, хочется все-таки такие более четкие выводы увидеть, раз, да, и б, понять, зачем вы эту базу делали и как вы ее будете использовать для вашего следующего исследования.
Да, Сергей, спасибо. Да, это будет как раз, надеюсь, на следующей нашей конференции. Я добавлю всю эту информацию.
Владимир, я вот Сергея дополню. Мне вот не хватило, знаете, каких-то прогнозов ваших в исследовании. То есть вот вы как бы снапшот текущего рынка IPO сделали, посмотрели ретроспективно, но каких-то идей по тому, что будет дальше происходить, вот никаких не предложили. То есть как бы круто, понятно, что там есть вот такие движения, вот так выглядит Китай, вот так выглядит Россия, а как бы дальше что вот с этой информацией сделать? То есть мне кажется, что эта мысль вот ее развить с точки зрения того, как это потом можно в научном поле использовать и, в общем, куда мы движемся.
Да, спасибо.
Я сказал, что не хватает какого-то, может быть, слайда о будущих направлениях, о будущей, может быть, методологии исследований, да, потому что, пока это как бы, вот хороший такой, знаете, кейс-анализ такой магистратуры.
Да. Это на самом деле...
В другой сфере с вами.
Да. Скоро будет этот анализ. Я, так скажем, первый подход к этой базе, я ее сделал буквально на этой неделе, на самом деле, поэтому я не успел, так сказать, погрузиться, сделать регрессию нормальную, сделать какие-то вещи, о которых идет речь, но это будет в следующем, скажем так, уже в следующем месяце, я бы сказал так. Поэтому эти результаты я представлю на обозрение. Безусловно, все ваши комментарии, я с ними абсолютно согласен.
И мне еще, знаете, что не хватило? Все-таки, у нас с вами научный семинар, да, я бы хотел, конечно, чтобы вот такие презентации все-таки дополнялись некоторым обзором литературы, да. То есть вот кто до вас, собственно говоря, может быть, снапшоты смотрел, да, рынковые IPO, я 100% уверен, что они были, да. И, может быть, какие-то вот причины, то есть вот те факторы, о которых вы говорите, да, вот раскрываются они в литературе, да, то есть и чтобы подчеркнуть именно вот те разрывы в исследованиях академических, которых как бы вы в будущем будете раскрывать, да.
Безусловно.
Как раз и идеальный был бы вариант, если вы сначала сделали обзор литературы, потом снапшот, а потом сказали, что вот я вижу такие гэпы в литературе, вот у меня такой снапшот, я дальше делаю исследование в таком направлении. Вот, это
Безусловно.
Просто, нам было бы это как слушателям более интересно.
Да, отлично. Спасибо.
Спасибо большое.
Спасибо.
Вот. Тогда, если ни у кого вопросов нету с присутствующих, я тогда передаю слово Светлане Самирович Меднику. Вот.
Здравствуйте.
Да, здравствуйте. Слышно.
Отлично. Hello, Svetlana. I'm PhD student, and today we're going to start our presentation. Is there any reason in Russia for the of the 2004-2007 USA real estate bubble? The total volume of investment in Russian real estate in the first 3 quarters of 2022 is 41 higher than the same period last year. The residential real estate market has undergone no less important changes. Government program and companies marketing were aimed to stimulate demand on the thousands of the housing market. Preferential mortgage and developers mortgage program made purchasing house more attractive, and mortgage volume rose. This, however, led to house price increase. In Moscow, price of 1 square meter of apartment rose from 188,000 rubles in September 2020 to 272,000 rubles in February 2022. Despite this, Russian government refused to cancel the program and has prolonged it till July 2024. In this situation, many researchers and experts talk about rising house bubble and predict possible bust if no action taken by regulators. Russian central bank also has doubts on the situation. It declares necessity to take control of the promotion campaign from developers to reduce possible risk from them. The real estate bubble in the USA had an impact on the entire global economy. To understand how realistic the recurrence of the real estate bubble in the Russian is, and there is a significant similarity in the qualitative characteristics of the current situation and the state of affairs in 2027, we built an econometric model to help confirm the presence of a bubble in our market, and the result of the study will help to quickly respond to the emerging bubble and tell us whether to rely on the experience of the situation in the USA market. Let's start from the theoretical part of our research, real estate bubble detection methodologies. A bubble in the real estate market is defined by researchers in the same way as in the other market, an abnormal and self-sustaining price growth. The most important characteristic of the development of bubble is the lack of fundamental justification for price increase. It grows due to the expectation of even greater growth by investors in the future. There are several models in the scientific literature that attempt to assess the presence of a real estate bubble. For example, it is possible to use the ratio of price to rent assumed under normal market conditions, the presence of the same trend indicators over a long time period. Excuse me. This approach does determine whether price change are fundamental. Another methodology was proposed that studies the stationarity of series of fundamental and the real price values. Tamal used OLS and the IVX model in their work. In our research, we tend to use the methodology proposed by them. There are not so many researchers trying to study the Russian real estate market. Most of them are focused on the manifestation of factors that affect price dynamics. For example, Russian authors argue that there are bubbles as a result of the population overestimating expectation or the predicting dynamics. There is a set of scientific papers that analyze the step of government and the policies that affect prices. This relates more to the analysis of specific cases than to the search for such a market phenomenon as a bubble. Our study will fill a gap in the academic literature on the emerging market.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Baino Sadno, and I'm here to present the second part of our presentation and our article. Our research was to find whether there is a bubble in the Russian housing market, and second, whether the nature of relationship of different variables or fundamental variables changes over time. In our study, we used the methodology that was proposed by Tomel in his work, and that work uses the IVX and the PSY procedures and can be divided logically into 3 different steps. The first step is to estimate the fundamental component of price to rent ratio. You can see that YT, that is log change of price to rent ratio, can be estimated as an equation 1, where Y is intercept, gamma is intercept, xt minus 1 is previous values of matrix of fundamental variables. Here we can find the estimates of the fundamental component. Next, and the second step, we try to allocate the non-fundamental component. As we can see on the second equation on the screen, given the estimates of Y or estimates of fundamental component, we can now allocate the non-fundamental one. And third and the final step is detecting bubbles. Using the non-fundamental component as a goal variable, we now can detect bubble using PSY procedure proposed in Tomel, and to find out whether there is a bubble, we should first calculate the BS-ADF statistics that is shown on the first row of the screen, and compare it to its critical value. The critical value can be found with the Monte Carlo simulation of their equation on the row 2. Then, given the critical value of BS-ADF and its calculated statistics, we can argue whether there is bubble, crisis, or there is nothing. As you can see, the hypothesis of a bubble propose that beta 0 is equal 0, which shows us that there is no non-fundamental price changes over time, and beta 1 greater than 0 means that, as you can see on the second row of our equation, beta 1 means that change in non-fundamental component of price depends only on its previous changes. So that is the major point of a bubble, that there is shouldn't be non-fundamental component growth, but it is growing just because it is growing. The data we used was divided into two parts. The first part are the first and the second rows of the table. They are real price and real rent that are average price and average rent price in Moscow apartment adjusted for inflation. And the second part of data is the fundamental data. The fundamental variables, labor force, salary, money supply, and mortgage, were selected to imitate the the data that were used in Tommel's article. It should be noted that IVX and PSY procedures are two different procedures, and IVX is to find the non-fundamental component, and PSY is to detect the bubble. They can be used separately, and the PSY not necessarily use the non-fundamental component. We can just use house price as input, and the results can be different. To show this, we tested our model on USA housing market with a longer range of observation. And you can see that when we use just price for our PSY monitor, we can identify 5 different ranges where the bubble was detected. And when we use IVX and allocate the non-fundamental component of price, it's something just like restrict our model, and now we can see that only 3 different periods are detected. On the graph, you can see that without IVX, with just price, we can allocate broader range of price bubble than using non-fundamental components with IVX. What about Russian or particularly Moscow house prices? Detecting bubbles, we run our IVX model, and it gives us these results. We can see that IVX model gives us quite similar results to ordinary least square, but the significant variables are better in IVX model. And on your left, you can see the price to rent ratio, which are actual data, the orange line, and their predicted values that were predicted with IVX model, the blue line. And on your right, you can see the behavior of fundamental and non-fundamental components. We can see that non-fundamental one is more volatile than fundamental one. To test whether the relationship between variables differ. We tested our models for shorter periods, for recent period from 2020 to 2022, and we can see that our statistics are now higher, and but not all statistics are significant at all. Now we can say that there is a change in the relationship between variables, fundamental variables, over time. But to find out whether it is better described our model, we should test it further in further researches. And we can see that model for shorter period gives us better results and better prediction for price to rent ratio.
And now we start our qualitative part of research. It is a comparative description of the situation in Russia 2023 and the USA in 2007. Let's start with the USA market. You see the reduction in 2004. I'm sorry. What is it? Okay. Reduction in 2004 of the Ferris rate to the minimum value of 1%, and the emergence of a huge amount of cheap money in the country, in the USA. The rapid development of mortgage market with an increase in demand for real estate. A sharp increase in housing construction, which lead to significant overproduction, and a decrease at the first relatively smooth in the price in the real estate market due to the fact that supply exceeds demand. An increase in the PRS rate after a record low level several times at once, from 1% to 5% at 2006 year. A decrease in the solvency of borrowers and a sharp decline in demand in the real estate market, and as a result, a collapse in price. The debtor could not repay the loan due to a drop in his income, and the bank could not compensate for the cost of the loan with the collateral, since the market price for it becomes significantly less than the amount of the loan. The situation was worsened by the fact that the majority of the borrowers was responsible to the bank only for the collateral. And now the Russian situation, 2023, for an ordinary citizen obtaining a mortgage loan is greatly simplified. In turn, this led to a sharp increase in the number of borrowers, to an increase in demand for loans in various government programs of refinancing and subsidizing, with which the government seeks to improve the demographic situation in the country. However, the central bank refinancing rate didn't fall to a record low level. It is equal to 7.5%. The mortgage is uninsured, but overall level of debt on housing loan is growing in 25 regions. Housing loan account for more than 50% of the debt. The share of overdue mortgage debt is gradually decreasing, and in August 2022 up to 5.9%. This value is achieved, among other things, through refinancing and subsidizing loans program. These two situations with rising real estate price are of completely different nature, which we can see from the listing things.
Our conclusion is that PSY procedure didn't show us a housing bubble market on Moscow housing market, and that we used our model both for non-fundamental price component and both for just price of house market, and PSY monitor didn't detect anything at all. And we can now argue that there is no housing bubble on the Russian housing market.
Yep, and the nature of the relationship of variables change over time. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you very much, guys. Also very interesting presentation. Someone still have any questions?
Это от меня шутки, что ли?
Очень
Я не пойму. Включаю звук.
Потому что вы дважды вошли каким-то образом, умудрились.
Что?
Я думаю, трижды.
Да.
Svetlana, the same question is for Vladimir. What is your future research directions? How you will use the information that you received at this step of your research, and how it will contribute in your final research, if you already know this?
For questions. Now, this research is part of my PhD paper. Yeah. My title of PhD paper is Factor Investing in Real Estate Market. And I try to understand which products in real estate market in Russia and USA we have, and how price change. And after that paper, that article, we should understand how to go to the main idea of factor investing, to choose some factors and to understand how they change with the time.
Okay.
May I also
Igor,
step into the discussion? Do you hear me?
yes, Irina Vasilievna, we hear
I don't know
you.
what happened
Perfect.
to my laptop, but I cannot open the video. I tried, but it's not possible today. You know, I didn't understand them. So what is your background in the literature? You have to try to summarize what is already done in the literature in the topic you are trying to go through, plus all the relevant topics. You presented some theoretical background, as you called it, but I didn't see any summary in the literature. So what is done in the literature and what is going to be your contribution? That's the most important thing for PhD.
Yeah. Okay. I get your questions. First of all, we start with understanding what other authors made in this field. And after that, we can do something by ourselves. And in this article, we take the model from another authors and make some research on Russian market. And our input it is use of model from Tomol at the Russian market. And while we using this model, we understand and we must change some variables in that. And we do this by ourselves. We, can you say what we changed?
Yes, we try to adopt the Tomol work for our Russian, particularly Moscow housing market. And I'd like simultaneously maybe answer the question on the messages because our goal for further researches is to find better fundamental data for allocating non-fundamental components. Because as you could see, the significance of our model was quite low, and it may be that Tomal that used it for Poland, that's our fundamental data that can describe the change in the house pricing can be quite different, and we tried to use different types of variables. For example, we didn't use just unemployment. We could try to use the number of employed, the number of unemployed, the different types of unemployment rate, and selected the variables that were better for our model. We actually tried to use another range of data, but the log salary was significant, and other variables were not significant, even with no log salary in the model.
And now we get some relationship between variables in our last model, and by this way we get some inputs for our future article about fundamentals and about factors in real estate model. Because my main reason for this research is understand is it fundamental or not fundamental price changes on our market.
Okay, thank you. But again, you know, it's not only our habit, I mean, in the high school of economics, that we, every time we require from every type of student, even from bachelor students, but of course from PhD students, at first you should have the classified literature analysis. You should summarize then what are the determinants in the literature by different periods, or maybe by different industries, or by maybe different countries. You should think why maybe some of these determinants will not work in your model here. You need the second step to understand what is the fundamental difference in the environment, whether this set of determinants is going to be significant for the Russian market at all. Without that summary, it's very difficult to understand what's your logic, because you are talking about, this is our first article, maybe we can find some additional factors that we will investigate with the second article. But the process, to my mind, should be vice versa. Vice versa, it means at first you need to set up your logic step by step. Next, say, okay, now we have this type of data. What can we do with this type of data? How we can solve, let's say, the first set of our targets, of our messages, of our objectives. So can you now very briefly summarize, so what is now your decision, what you've got? What is your key main result? What is your key main summary? You are comparing United States market, Russian market, you've got some model, you've got some data, so what's your key summary?
The key summary, I guess, would be quite short. Unlike many experts say, there is no housing price bubble on the housing market of Moscow. In spite of growing price, this price could be described with different fundamental data.
Okay, thank you. I think we have the discussant. Yulia Vanesova wanted to participate in the discussion. Yulia, do you hear us?
Julia sent a question into the chat. She asked that only log mortgage is a significant variable in the model. Is it true? And if it's true, do you check the model without this indicator?
Yes, I tried to answer that question during answering the previous question because testing whether there is other more significant variables is our goal for our further research.
In our article, we have two independent methodologies. First one with the significance, and the other one PCY without.
PCY just using price. Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Julia, does your microphone work? Can you speak loudly and can you say a few comments and some words about the paper?
I guess that means we answered the question.
Oh, the microphone of Julia doesn't work today. Okay, unfortunately.
Thank you very much for your advices. Yeah.
Any other comments from some different participants from PhD?
Yes, I have a comment. Guys, thank you for your article. My question is quite similar to that from Irina Vasilyevna. And I would ask you, what is the consequences of the bubble on the market, and what is the final conclusion and recommends regarding your issue?
I guess that I cannot speak about any forecasts because our research showed that price is growing due to different fundamental issues can be described with fundamental data, and to know whether there can be or cannot be a price bubble in the future, we should first forecast the fundamental data, and that, I guess, is quite different task. I can only say that there was no and there is no bubble on the current housing market.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you very much, guys. Any other questions from the audience?
Александр Маркович, у вас микрофон выключен.
Александр Маркович, микрофон. Да.
May I give a question? Is it correct? Don't listen for me.
Yeah.
Yes, you compare
Yes.
two markets, Russia and USA, and there was previous publication according this topic in Russia. For example, PhD thesis of Poroshina Agata. Do you compare results and conclusions?
We didn't compare the results, but we used the methodology of authors from 2021 year. And, this methodology at the Russian market don't use.
Maybe see this paper.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Due to some technical problems that I just have, because I cannot open the video, and Julia also got some problems, so we would like to switch to Zoom. So our assistant Albina, she has sent the link to the Zoom, to your emails. So let's meet in, if it's possible, in 10 minutes in Zoom and quit the webinar platform. So all discussants and all participants are kindly invited to get our webinar, look, find the links in their emails and enter once again back to Zoom.
Okay.
Message. Maybe it will be technically better in Zoom than here. I don't know. Let's see. Thank you.
Okay.
According to the schedule, we have a break until 11:45.
It's too big.
Maybe we can start 11:30.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Because in the program, I guess there is a mistake. For the first break. So let's start at 11:30.
Okay, let's start at 11:30 in Zoom platform because webinar, it seems like does not work properly, unfortunately, as usual.
See everybody in 15 minutes at 11:30.
Recording in progress.
Альбина, мы сейчас переходим в этот Zoom, но вы, как наш помощник по технической части, пожалуйста, надо как-то рулить этим микрофоном, постоянно идут лишние звуки.
А можно еще Альбину попросить, чтобы остальным участникам тоже послала эту ссылку, что они не подключались?
Сергей Владимирович просит послать еще раз всем ссылки остальным участникам. Ну, я думаю, что вы уже выслали. Но надо как-то в самом теле письма предупредить дискуссантов, что мы меняем глаз, или просто даже им позвонить, потому что они могли внести в календари, и сейчас не обратят внимания, что новые соцсети появились.
Да, я думаю, что надо все-таки даже перезвонить.
Теряют каждую минуту почту. У всех свои дела. И надо рулить микрофоном, надо выключать всем микрофоны, кроме спикеров. Вы же там обладаете такой функцией, такой задачей. Да, спасибо.
Так, у нас перерыв до 11:30, в 11:30 продолжим.
Да, вот видите, когда сама не влезешь ни во что, вот с Альбиной, просто беда. Она совершенно не заботится о том, что делает. Закатать такой перерыв на больше, чем полчаса. Зачем? Делала все до последней минуты.